This is Stop 9 on the Regina Cyclone self-guided walking tour. The Regina Cyclone of 1912 was Canada's deadliest tornado, with 28 dead and 10% of the city's population left homeless. This tour will lead you through locations in Regina's downtown, starting from the Hotel Saskatchewan and continuing north through the downtown before completing the tour at Victoria Park. Along the way, you will learn about landmarks, both past and present, that mark impacted locations affected by the cyclone's destructive power. The next location on our tour is the north side of the Canadian Pacific Railway tracks, including the Warehouse District. Regina is a railroad town. The city would literally not exist if the Canadian Pacific Railway had not laid down tracks and selected it as a stop. Lieutenant Governor Edgar Dewdney located Regina in such an inhospitable spot because he owned land nearby, but the CPR moved his preferred location for the train station, near what is now the RCMP depot, to what is now the downtown of Regina. Hotels, businesses, and churches sprang up in and around the rail depot on the south side of the tracks, even though the depot itself was located on the north side of the tracks until 1892. Initially, the townsite trustees, a mixture of representatives from the CPR, the Canadian Northwest Land Company, and the federal government, owned all the land in the original townsite boundaries. Taxes derived from the land sales were to go to essential services for the fledgling town. The trustees would not pay their full share of taxes on the unsold lots, however, and so much of the land to the north of the tracks remained unsold. In 1902, the unsold lots were divided. The federal government took control of half of these lots, and the largest parcel, which was located between Dewdney Avenue and 4th Avenue, Albert Street, and Winnipeg Street, was transferred to the city. This allowed the city to reserve much of this land north of the tracks for commercial and industrial purposes. There was some residential development in this area during this period, little pockets of which remain residential to this day. The remaining land was to become one of Regina's biggest commercial and warehouse districts. The development of Regina as a distribution center first began in 1902, when Regina's Board of Trade was able to convince the federal government to give Regina a more favorable freight rate for farm machinery. This brought the agricultural firms, such as John Deere and International Harvester, to Regina. The city of Regina partnered with the CPR to develop a chunk of land around the railroad tracks for CPR use. Today, this land is slated for redevelopment by the city of Regina as part of the Regina Revitalization Initiative project. The CPR has now moved its freight yards to the west part of the city in the global transportation hub. Back in 1912, however, the close proximity to the downtown and the railroad tracks made the north side of the tracks a desirable place to locate freight warehouses and manufacturing facilities. Businessmen built large brick warehouses with steel frames. The CPR constructed a large brick roundhouse for turning train engines around. Spur lines were laid down so that the freight could be brought directly to and from many of these warehouses. Elevators were built along the tracks so that grain could be shipped to eastern markets. The upshot of this development was that the north side of Regina was filled with large, well-constructed buildings that were designed to stand the test of time. It is in this district, then, that we can see the true destructive force of the 1912 cyclone's power. South of the tracks, the buildings were primarily wood frame houses, smaller commercial buildings made of brick, or the occasional steel frame construction such as the Donahue Building. North of the tracks, buildings were steel frame, brick and concrete. These were buildings meant to last, designed to house heavy equipment and weighty stock. The Regina Cyclone was an F4 on the Fujita wind damage scale for tornadoes. In an F4 tornadoes, winds can reach up to 207 to 260 miles per hour. Train cars are thrown around. Large trees are uprooted. Well-constructed dwellings are destroyed, and large objects such as buildings or roofs become missiles. buildings such as the Winnipeg elevator became little more than toothpicks, while the train cars servicing the elevator were thrown around like children's toys. Mulligan's livery stable, which was located along the CPR tracks, was picked up intact and with 50 horses inside, and lifted in the air, dropped down on the twisted railroad tracks. The horses all survived the bizarre trip. George B. Craven, a dairy instructor originally from New Zealand, was not as lucky. He was crushed by a flying boxcar near the CPR roundhouse. The death toll north of the tracks was 7. Joseph J. Bryan was killed by debris in the Tudhope Anderson warehouse, but his fallen body fell atop J. Ingram and provided some cushioning from debris that probably saved Ingram's life. Laura MacDonald was killed by a flying 2x4 when she ventured outside to secure the chicken coop door. James, Ida, and Barbara McDougall died from injuries received when their house collapsed on them. George Appleby, beloved Boy Scout leader, was crushed to death by a collapsing house wall. His scout troop rallied despite their leader's death, acting as a messenger service, running from wreckage to rescuers, and greatly facilitating the search and rescue operations. The houses in the North End were of a decidedly more working-class bent than those located in the transition area. About 2,500 people, nearly 10% of Regina's population, was left homeless by the storm. You may be asking yourself, what is the difference between a cyclone and a tornado? A cyclone is a violent rotating windstorm, while a tornado is a localized and violently destructive windstorm occurring over land characterized by a funnel-shaped cloud extending toward the ground. So a tornado and a cyclone are basically the same thing, a big spinning vortex of wind. Regina's cyclone was actually 2 tornado funnel clouds that left a path of destruction 20 kilometers in length and 150 meters wide. Cyclone was the term used most in 1912, but subsequent researchers have come to refer to it more frequently as a tornado, in keeping with meteorological terminology. The Regina Cemetery, located at 4th Avenue and Broad Street, offers a self-guided cemetery tour that includes the grave sites of the tornado's victims. You can download the tour at regina.ca under the Cemeteries tab. The next stop on our tour is the Garth Street Mall between 11th and 12th Avenues. You can find the City of Regina on Twitter and Facebook, or visit regina.ca for more information about Regina, including more heritage and history content.